Action Comics number 1088 is a perfect issue to read, either in anticipation of or in the aftermath of seeing the new Superman movie. So based on all the positive reviews I've been seeing, the world seems to be in a very receptive mood as far as Superman stories are concerned right now. And this is a great issue and a great story overall for people who are in very Superman receptive moods, especially people who aren't that familiar with the comic book side of Superman lore. This issue and the story at large take a look at Clark Kent's early adventures as a teenage Superboy, and in this issue in particular, a mysterious fire is set at Smallville High. Yeah, this issue sets up a lot of what I will refer to as Smallville type stuff. The high school Clark Kent's crush on teenage Lana Lang, the glasses and that whole disguise, things like that. I really can't emphasize enough just how much Mark Waid really gets the Clark Kent slash Superboy character and how his mind works and how his heart works. It's really demonstrated in this issue in a scene between Superboy and a corrupt businessman. I also really love this take on the early Superboy costume, where like Clark hasn't quite figured out, what he's going to make the costume from and how it works. He appears to be wearing not only Chuck Taylors in this issue, but red khaki shorts and a belt. I just think that's awesome. Historically, Action Comics hasn't always been priority reading for me. But this week it was at the top of my proverbial stack, and if you're a Superman fan, and if you're basking in the glow of the movie right now, there's really no better book for you to be reading than this one, in my opinion. It's certainly priority reading for me now. Today feels like a good day to talk about Superman. Don't ask me why, it just does. No, of course, the new Superman movie, fittingly titled Superman, hits theaters officially today, and I'm excited to see it. I don't know if I'll see it for another couple of weeks just because of my schedule, but people seem to like it. And to coincide with the film's release, DC Comics put out a few different Superman issues this week, plus a new Supergirl issue. That's great, no complaints. And the best one of them all, in my opinion, was Superman Treasury 2025 Hero for All by Dan Jurgens and Bruno Redondo. So this is a tremendously oversized issue, about 70 to 80 pages, I think, about an alien invasion that affects the entire DCU, but ultimately it's about Superman and his place in the DCU. So Dan Jurgens wrote this, and Dan Jurgens is like a quintessential Superman writer and artist. He's worked on countless Superman stories over the last 3 decades or so, including, and perhaps most notably, The Death of Superman. So yeah, anytime his name shows up on a Superman story, it's at least worth a look. And you know what? Not for nothing, this just might be one of the best Superman stories he's ever done. Meanwhile, our artist Bruno Redondo and our colorist Adriano Lucas are just coming off an Eisner Award-winning run on Nightwing. They also produced this page during a run on Suicide Squad. So I was really excited to see them work on Superman for this extended project. Beautiful cover by Redondo and Lucas too, by the way. Kind of Christopher Reeve-ish. This feels a little bit like one of those stories that Mark Waid writes for Dan Mora, in the sense that we not only have our focus and title characters, but we have like peripheral heroes from all across the DCU, and of course Bruno Redondo and Adriano Lucas get to work on all of them. It's a real treat in that sense. Jurgens even gets to do some pages himself from an art standpoint, as we flash back and look at some of Superman's history. I really like the way Lex Luthor is portrayed in this issue. Sometimes getting him right is equally as important as getting characters like Superman and Lois right. Ultimately, of course, this issue shows us that it's not Superman's powers that make him great and special. It's his soul and the love and the friendships and the relationships that he creates in his life. There's no better time to have a Superman story like that. this might just wind up being the best Superman comic to come out this year. It might even make its way onto my favorite comics of 2025 list that comes out in December. Stay tuned in that respect. Jimmy Olsen gets a little bit of a spotlight in Absolute Superman number 9. So yeah, in this issue, Superman gets to spend a little bit of quality time with Jimmy Olsen, who in this universe is a member, like a soldier, in the Omega Men, which is like the resistance group to the evil Lazarus organization. I like that. Jimmy Olsen in general is kind of an underappreciated character in the modern era, but you know, don't underestimate the value of a good best friend character, or best pal, you might say. Indeed, in this issue, the Omega Men kind of take care of Superman a little bit, and as such, he teams up with them. That's what the cover is about. It's like a visual metaphor. He doesn't literally put on the Omega Men helmet, it's just they did that for effect. And thank God for that. You know, I said this when I talked about Absolute Superman number 8, but I just can't stand when they armor up Superman, or like give him extra gadgets and whatnot. It just feels so lame. Like, he's already Superman. What does he need extra gadgets and armor for? It's kind of like that bit of old Jerry Seinfeld material that he used to do about wearing a Superman costume as a kid, but his mom makes him wear a jacket over the costume. The big, like, line at the end of the story is, "I don't recall Superman wearing a jacket." Don't wreck Superman's costume or make him lame, okay? As current box office numbers seem to indicate, he's just fine the way he is. There's a trigger warning on the very first page of Krypto, the Last Dog of Krypton, number 2. Yeah, that's something you don't see every day. I mean, okay, technically they call it a content warning, but, you know, tomato, tomato, same thing. It's that little purple box there. You see it? So this issue is about how a preteen Lex Luthor owned Krypto the Superdog for a short time before Krypto was Clark Kent's dog. And if you come into this issue knowing that, you kind of get a sense of what the content they're warning you about is going to be. And indeed, on the second page, we do see Lex physically abuse the dog. I'm not going to show that to you, but the early pages of this issue have been released to the public, so they're out there if you want to see them. It's kind of interesting to me that they would choose to do this kind of thing now. Like the same month that Krypto appears in the big Superman movie, and the world is in love with Krypto, and oh, okay, let's do an issue where Lex Luthor beats the dog up. For the record, as somebody who has cared for rescue dogs over the course of his life, I was not hugely offended or, you know, morally aghast by what this issue showed me with Lex and the dog. I mean, I didn't like it, but I think if you're going to go into that kind of territory, they went about as tamely as they could. Did they really need to go there? No, but, you know, I guess you can justify it by saying it serves its purpose in giving us a window into Lex's psyche and the way he thinks and how he kind of becomes what he's going to become. As far as the warning is concerned, you know, even as somebody who is, full disclosure, pretty liberal in mind and heart, I tend to think there are a few too many trigger warnings in the world. I mean, we can discuss that at a later date if you want to. As far as the content warning itself is concerned, I can kind of take it or leave it in this instance. I mean, what they do is relatively tame, but they didn't exactly hurt themselves by putting it there, so it's whichever way you want to think about it. Incidentally, when I talked about the first issue, I mentioned Jay Lee and June Chung's cover and how they might not be the right artists to work on the covers for a book like this, just from a tonal perspective. But oddly enough, I do think that their art works for a Lex Luthor and Krypto cover. Go figure. DC Comics continues to invest in Krypto, the dog, not the currency, in Superman Unlimited #3. How many times do you think that joke, or like a version of that joke, has been used either publicly or privately since Krypto first showed up in that first Superman trailer? I mean, it's gotta be like hundreds of thousands of times. What can I say, folks? Sometimes the low-hanging fruit is there and you just grab it. But yeah, this is a Krypto the Superdog focused issue. We see various moments from Krypto's life, ranging from like his early days with young Clark Kent, to some adventures with Superman, to a time with John Kent, and then a confrontation between Superman, Krypto, and Toyman. You know, one of the things I really appreciate about Dan Slott's writing is that he remembers that Superman comics are supposed to be fun. Like, it should be fun to read a Superman comic book. The art here by Rafael Albuquerque and the colors by Marcelo Maiolo are really good at getting that across, but I'm mainly talking about the writing here. I think that modern superhero comic book writers, some of them at least, can sometimes be guilty of trying to be a little too high-minded with their stories, and as such, it kind of feels like they get up their own ass a little too much. And that's not to say that you can't be smart in writing a superhero comic book, but I'm just really grateful that in writing Superman Unlimited, Dan Slott remembers to keep the sense of fun and excitement and childlike joy instilled in the proceedings. You don't always see that with Superman comics nowadays. That's something that was true of his work on Spider-Man, too. And I think it's one of the reasons he's so successful with superhero stories. Like, for instance, the early pages of this book are about Clark trying to train Krypto to use his powers in a non-destructive way, and there's this shot of Krypto in a bathtub that he has just filled with junk and wrecked, and it's fun. There are a few different moments like that in this issue, including one where John Kent, a young John Kent, takes Krypto for a walk, and Krypto gets excited and pulls him all around the world. They go past, like, Smallville, Gorilla City, etc. But at the same time, the book's heart is in the right place, which is so important. Like, for instance, there's a panel here where young Clark tells Krypto that the strong are supposed to protect the weak. That's a really great Superman moment, and a sentiment that, quite frankly, many in the real world would be keen to subscribe to. You know, late last year, coming into this year, I talked about how Wonder Woman comics these days are better than they've been in like 20 years. I'm starting to think, and I'm hoping, that we're about to get to a similar place with modern Superman comics. Certainly that's a goal worth striving for. You know, I would really appreciate it if someone, anyone, could get me to feel something about the Legion of Superheroes. Any of them. Even just one of them. I've been reading DC Comics for about 25 years now. I can't get into the Legion of Superheroes or care about them. It doesn't work for me for some reason. And as illustrated in Superman #28, which came out this past week, DC is about to try again with the Legion. And you know what? In all fairness, I guess this story has as much of a shot as any with me, but my expectations really aren't high. So in DC Comics lore, it's generally accepted that when he was a teenager, when he was Superboy, Clark Kent went to the 31st century and made friends and teamed up with a bunch of superheroes there that were inspired by his legacy. Naturally, that premise raises a lot of questions and doesn't necessarily make the most sense, but For whatever reason, it's stuck, and we've had the Legion of Superheroes since, I think, the 50s? Well, now in this story, which I think is called Legion of Darkseid, Darkseid has apparently gone into the future and corrupted at least some members of the Legion, and now they're coming back to fight Superman in the present day. What we see in this issue is fine, what we see in the story is fine so far, but I maintain I don't feel any kind of strong connection to any of these Legion characters. I don't know if the solution to that is to do flashbacks or, more intimate scenes between them and Superman. The art is beautiful, I'm not knocking that. We've got Dan Mora on the pencils, and he's one of the best in the world right now, and then we've got Alejandro Sanchez on the colors. One thing I can definitely appreciate that our author Joshua Williamson does here is he introduces, or I guess reintroduces, a character into the proceedings that certainly complicates things and ups the intrigue, and I was not expecting that. But yeah, as I said, this story has about as good a shot as any at getting me interested and invested in the Legion of Superheroes as characters and as people. But because virtually every story I've ever read about the Legion has failed in that respect, that's both good news and bad news. I'll throw it out to the audience here. Can you guys recommend some Legion of Superhero stories to me? Am I missing something? Have I not read some crucial book? Tell me.